So let's get started. We're continuing moving right along in this Aqidat al-Ghazali, this creedal document of al-Ghazali that has been called by some people Qawaid al-Aqaid, the rules or fundamentals of the convictions. And we left off here where the author says, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him, وأنه في ذاته معلوم الوجود بالعقول, and that he in his self is known to be existent by the intellects, or if you want to translate fi as in, and that he in his self is known to be existent by the intellects. Ma'lumul wujud, his existence is known. Bil ruqul, by the intellects. How's that? Do they know him necessarily, or do they know him by inference? His self is known to be existent by the minds, the uqul, which is plural of aql, which is the mind or the intellect or reason. How does the mind work? Well, it works in two ways. Yani, how would you know something by your mind? There's two ways to know something by your mind. Either you know it intuitively by badiha, or you know it by istidlal, by inference, by deducing it, or if you want, by learning it. What does this talk mean? Well, let's stick really close to the words of Al-Ghazali here. He says, وَأَنَّهُ فِي ذَاتِهِ مَعْلُومُ الْوُجُودِ, and that he in his self, his that, his self means his being, his self or his being is مَعْلُومُ الْوُجُودِ, a known existence if you want, or the one whose existence is known by the mind. So if that means they know him intuitively, that means they know that God exists without even having to think about it. And if they know God's existence by inference, that means they thought about something like the fact that the world exists, like there's a world existing around them, or they thought about their own existence. One pondered on his own existence, and then from there he reached a conclusion and said, there must be a God. He looked around him, for example. He said, there's skies and earth, sun and moon and clouds and stars and plants and animals and seas and winds and light and dark. And all of this is so amazing. There must be a God. So that's an inference, because he started somewhere, and from there he reached a conclusion. He used his mind. That's using his mind to know that God exists. So this is the case of most of the people. Most of the people, they know God's existence by inference, but easy one, not complicated one. By thinking about something such as the existence of the world around them, or by thinking about one's own existence. And then he would say there must be a God within himself, even if he doesn't say it with his tongue. And some of the slaves of God, they know God intuitively. They didn't have to think about it. That's because of how smart they are. But most of the people, they knew God by inference, but it's easy one. It's not like complicated math problem. It's not trigonometry or calculus. He says, Mar'iyu dhati bil absar, and he is a seen being. A seen being. Seen here doesn't mean presently seen by us, but mar'i, it means seen. This word mar'i has, according to the rules of sarf, the pattern of maf'ul, although it doesn't look like maf'ul. If we made it look like maf'ul, we'd say mar'uy, 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 maf'ul. But you don't say mar'uy, say mar'i, seen. Allah sees himself in eternity. He sees his eternal self with his eternal sight. And his slaves shall see him in the afterlife. His believing slaves shall see him in the afterlife with their created visions. They will see the uncreated one with their created visions without having to look into any direction. So they don't see him now. So he's not right now, like in the present life. In the present life means for us. Time applies to us. In this present life of ours, Allah is not mar'i to us now, seen. In the afterlife, when the believers see him, he will be mar'i to them. When he will be seen to them. So this is the way that Al-Ghazali worded this. It's nice words. Mar'iyu that. So the closest I can get it, and Allah knows best, is a seen being. So when it comes to the creations, we say seeing God is possible according to the mind. Seeing God is possible according to the mind. That means the mind, the mere mind, does not say that seeing God is impossible. What would be impossible is for God to have a shape or a form or a color. He's seen without being a shape or a form or a color. It's when they do see him, when the believers see him in the afterlife. So the judgment of seeing him according to the mere mind, when I say the mind, I mean not even considering the religious documents. What do the religious documents say about seeing God? Before that, the mere mind alone judges that God could be seen, but that he won't be seen like other things are seen. So seeing him, like Imam An-Nasafi said, is jaizun fil aql, possible according to the mind. So that's what Al-Ghazali is saying here. Mar'iyu that, a seen being, yani one who can be seen. Bil absar, by the absar. So one might translate absar here as visions. Basar. Absar, the plural of basar. Take this kasra away here. Basar means vision. But you could use the word basar to mean the eyes itself, or the eye itself. The absar could be the eyes themselves. And this is the case. The believers in the afterlife will see Allah with the eyes in their heads. That's what Abu Hanifa said, rahimahullah. That means really seeing him without having to look into any direction to see him, without him being everywhere. They will see the one who's actually not anywhere. They will see him without him being anywhere. And they won't have to look into a direction to see him because he's not anywhere. But he exists, and they will see him. So they see him with their eyes. That's going to be their everlasting eyes in the afterlife. The people of the garden shall see the everlasting one with their everlasting eyes. And we will not see the everlasting one with our mortal eyes in this lifetime. No one in this lifetime, not even Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and no angel would see God with his eyes. That's reserved for the afterlife. Ni'matan minh. His being a seen being by the visions or by the eyes is an endowment from him. As an endowment from him. Ni'matan minh, as an endowment from him. A being seen by the eyes as an endowment from him. Because seeing God in the afterlife is one of the enjoyments of heaven. As for the inmates of hell, they will never see God. Any person who dies not as a Muslim, he will never see God. Not in his grave, not on Judgment Day, and not when he goes into the hellfire. Never. But he will hear God's speech. He will hear God's speech when God questions him on Resurrection Day. The speech of God that's not letters or sounds or languages. He will hear it and he will understand being questioned about all of his life. Since he reached puberty, he'll be questioned about whatever he did since he reached puberty. That's hearing the speech of God. As for seeing God, that's reserved for the believers in the afterlife as an endowment. وَلُطْفًا بِالْأَبْرَارِ فِي دَارِ الْقَرَارِ, and as a mercy for the good doers in the everlasting abode. وَإِتْمَامًا مِنْهُ لِلنَّعِيمِ بِالنَّظَرِ إِلَى وَجْهِهِ الْكَرِيمِ, and as completion or perfection of the endowment upon them by looking at his noble self. Ila wajhihi al-kareem, the wajh here. So some people would translate that as looking at his face. That's what Wahhabi believe. And if they want to say it in a more covert way, but really still means what they believe in terms of their anthropomorphism, they'd say looking at his countenance. They still means face to them in a literal sense. Wajh here in this spot means his self. Like when Allah says in Surah Ar-Rahman, وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. Everlasting is your Lord himself. ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. Everlasting is the wajh of your Lord. That means your Lord himself. ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. How we can prove it means that, that's another topic. But it's possible. I just don't want to go that far. So wajh here means self. بِالنَّظَرِ إِلَى وَجْهِهِ الْكَرِيمِ, by looking at, so one might translate that as looking at. I usually translate it, though, as seeing. النَّظَرُ إِلَى, I usually translate as seeing. But someone might translate it as looking at. So if you were to say it that way, looking at, don't believe that God is in a direction. If someone were to say looking at God, it doesn't mean in a direction. It means seeing him. As someone once eloquently put it, I'd say God doesn't look like anything. That wasn't me. That was somebody. He said that. He said, makes sense. God just don't look like nothing. I was like, wow, mind blown. I already believed it. But when he put it that way, it was very profound to me. Then the author says, may Allah have mercy upon him, al-hayat wal-qudrah, life and power. This is an interesting title here. Title means that he wants, whatever he wants to talk about under the title is related to the title. And what did he put in the title here? Al-hayat wal-qudrah, life meaning God's attribute of life, wal-qudrah, and his attribute of power. It's an interesting title for putting those two together for one topic. One topic means that's why that's one title. The two of those together in one title, making that a topic. Now, as for the attribute of life, it is the validator, the musahih, the validator of power and will and knowledge and hearing and sight and speech. And but Al-Ghazali here, he puts it in a paragraph with Qudrah in particular. He says, وَأَنَّهُ تَعَالَى حَيٌّ قَادِرٌ, and that he, exalted is he, is alive, powerful. Hayyun, that's the adjective, alive or living. Living as an adjective, not as a verb. Al-Hayat is the attribute, which is life. The attribute of someone who has, of an attributed one. The attribute of an attributed one. So the attribute is Hayah, life. Then, therefore, the one attributed with Hayah would be described as Hay, alive or living. Uh, Qadir, powerful. Also, this is adjective. And Qudra is the attribute itself. So the Qudra is the attribute, and the Qadir is the attributed, the one attributed with Qudra. So then powerful. So what's life? It's the attribute of Allah by which He is alive, without body or soul. Had He not been alive, then nothing would exist. And what's the power of Allah? The power of Allah, according to the Ash'aris, is because Al-Ghazali is an Ash'ari, so we're going to explain it according to his way. This is his text. The power of Allah, according to the Ash'aris, is his attribute by which He creates and destroys. Destroy means renders non-existent. In this context here, destroy means renders non-existent, reduces to non-existence altogether. Not rubble, nothing. Makes not existing anymore. Makes it exist means wasn't existing, and then He made something that fills a space having attributes exist. Fills a space having some qualities. And He destroys also. So He would make it vanish into nothingness. وَأَنَّهُ تَعَالَى حَيٌّ قَادِرٌ. He is alive and powerful, but there's no conjunction here. If I were to translate with conjunction, I'd say alive and powerful and Jabbar and Qahir. But there's no conjunctions. So He's Hayyun, alive, Qadir, powerful, Jabbar, which I didn't explain yet, and Qahir, also, which I didn't explain yet. And Jabbar, that's Al-Jabbar, is one of His 99 names. You heard of maybe that basketball player, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? That's how you say it properly. Abdul-Jabbar, slave of Al-Jabbar. Allah is Al-Jabbar, and this name of Allah has more than one interpretation, which is the case of some of His names. If you want to study the names of Allah, then what did the Prophet say, alayhi salatu wassalam? Allah has 99 names, 100 minus 1. Whoever memorizes them and comprehends their meanings shall enter the garden. So memorize those names and study the tafsir of those names, and I'll give you a useful information. If you want to study the tafsir of those names, it's not going to happen in a day. And some of those names have more than one interpretation. So Al-Jabbar could mean the one who controls the creation. And it could mean the one who is perfect. And it could mean the one who fixes the situations of his slaves. And it could mean the untouchable. الذي لا تناله الأيدي, the untouchable. Qahir means dominator, subjugator. So if we want to explain this Jabbar in accordance with the context that Al-Ghazali put it, we're going to explain it with the meaning that reflects power, having power. Is Hayyun Qadirun Jabbarun Qahir. Qahir means the dominator, the subjugator. That's a reference to His attribute of power. لا يعتريه قصور ولا عجز. Lacking does not apply to Him. Slacking does not apply to Him. Qusur. Yeah. Lacking and slacking do not apply to him. Wala ajiz, nor weakness or disability or cripple or handicap. ولا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم, and sleep does not take him. Drowsiness does not take him, nor sleep. So that's in defiance of the Jews and the Christians who believe that God took a rest. Subhanallah. I remember as a child, and I read in the Bible, it said God took a rest. And I went to my mom and I said, why would God take a rest? She said, I don't know. Uh, the Jews said it first, and then the Christians took it from them. The Jews said after God created the creation, he laid back. Istalqa ala qafah. He laid back. It means on the back of his head. He laid back, as opposed to laying on his side or on the front. And all of that is blasphemy. That's confirmation of weakness. The drowsiness is what occurs before the sleep, which makes the head nod, before the person's mind faints. And the sleep is when his mind faints. And then he stops hearing what goes on around him, and also he doesn't feel. Yeah, and when we say he doesn't feel, I'm not talking about you smacked him, for example. You know what that means. Like, if you have a sleeping person, you just touched him, or you moved his hand or his foot, he might not realize he did anything. ولا يعارضه فناء ولا موت. Perishing does not go against him, nor death. He said, لا يعارضه. So, al-mu'arid is the thing that's contrary to you or goes against you, or even discredits you. So, fana, perishing, neither fana, perishing, nor maut, death, oppose him. وَأَنَّهُ, that means doesn't apply to him. It's not an attribute of his. Because he's living and powerful. لا يعارضه فناء ولا موت. So there's the relevance to his topic there. Al-Hayat, life. وَأَنَّهُ حَيٍّ, he's alive. لا يعارضه فناء ولا موت. Perishing does not happen to him, nor does death. وَأَنَّهُ ذُو الْمُلْكِ وَالْمَلَكُوتِ, and that he is possessor of the kingdom and the realm. What's the kingdom and the realm? The heavens and earth. He is possessor of heavens and earth. He owns everything. He owns us and what we own. And because he is the true owner, in reality, we don't own anything in reality. Our ownership of something is really a figurative one, because the real owner of whatever we have is God. So how would a thing have two real owners? Doesn't have two real owners. Only has one real owner. That's God. He is Dhul Mulk. Dhul means the one who has. And Al Mulk is the dominion. I translated it first as kingdom. And Al Malakut is an emphatic form of Mulk. The Malakut is the Mulk. and in my translation I said the realm. So he is possessor, I said, the possessor of the kingdom and the realm, or possessor of the dominion and the realm, or there might be other words you choose for translating that. وَالْعِزَّةِ وَالْجَبَرُوتِ, and possessor of the Izzah. The Izzah is the attribute of Allah. One of its explanations is the power. That's correct. We talked about that last time. Not last time, in another lesson actually. In another book when we were going over the Dua book. And it translated Izzah as power, and I had some words there. So it can be Al-Izzah can be interpreted as the power, and also can be interpreted to be actually his godhood, because the Izzah can be interpreted, it's an attribute of Allah, that's for sure, and it can be interpreted as his perfection, his greatness and his perfection. Allah has an attribute called godhood, and this same attribute has another name, which is perfection. He has an attribute called perfection. God's perfection is his godhood, and this attribute of perfection, the Kamal, it has several names, like Al-Izzah, so it might mean something like the glory, and Al-Rif'ah, the highness, and also even this one here, Al-Jabarut, the Jabarut. So that's the greatness. All of that is the attribute of perfection, which is the attribute of godhood. وَلَهُ السُّلْطَانُ وَالْقَهْرُ, and the dominion and the dominance are his. As-Sultan, as an attribute of Allah, is his ownership. Ownership is his, the Sultan. And Qahr is the dominance. We already said up here, he's Qahir. If he's Qahir, means he's attributed with Qahr. Qahr, dominating or dominance or supremacy or conquering, because everything is under his control. Wal khalq wal amr, and creating is his exclusively. And no one creates but God. And what we do is not called creating, even if the people use the word, I created this or that. Nobody created anything but Allah Ta'ala. Now someone might say, but in English, you might say creating. Okay, I'm going to now talk like the word creating is for God only. And I'm going to say for other than God, making, producing, or something like that. Creating, al-khalqu, creating is his. What does creating mean? Creating means bringing from nothingness into being. Bringing something from nothingness into being. That's the meaning of creating. So if you have a picture, like you drew a picture, you didn't create, because you have the paper and you have a pencil and you have a body. That's not making something from nothing. Or if you made a statue, you had some clay, for example. That's not making something from nothing. God can make something from nothing without tools, with no tools, and with no effort, with no effort. By mere will, it will come into existence in one way or another. Creating is his, wal amr, and commanding is his. He commands whatever he wills, and it's our duty to obey. You don't say, if God commanded you to do something, I don't want to do it. Even if you didn't want to do it, you're supposed to do it, because who are you? You are a creature. You are someone created by God. So who told you you can do whatever you want to do? You can't do whatever you want to do. Don't say, it's my body. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. You say, God created me. I have to do what he told me to do, what he commanded me to do. وَالسَّمَاوَاتُ مَطْوِيَّاتٌ بِيَمِينِهِ, And the heavens, if you translate the statement literally, someone might translate it like this. And the heavens or the skies are crumpled by his right. Biyamini. So, how does a Wahhabi understand this statement? According to Wahhabi conviction, this means, and this means God has two hands, a right one and a left one, according to him. And he's so big that he can fit all the heavens in one of his hands and then make a fist and ball up the heavens. That's how they believe. That's blasphemy. Because that gives God a picture. God doesn't have a picture. He doesn't have an image. Whatever you can imagine, he's different from that. This crumpling of the skies is biyaminihi here means by his power. But yamin does mean in the literal sense the right as opposed to the left. But who's going to believe that God has a right side and a left side, which would mean also he has an up and a down in the front and a back? Only an anthropomorphist. Someone who believes that God is a body, so he's a mushrik and he's a blasphemer and he worships a creation. Actually, he worships his own imagination because there's nothing like that actually. وَالْخَلَائِقُ مَقْهُورُونَ فِي قَبْضَتِهِ. And the many creations are uh, dominated in his qabdah, literally in his grasp. All this means under his power, under his control. Subhanallah. See what did Al-Ghazali do there? That's nice. Uh, so he explained the attribute of power. Subhanallah wa bihamdi. He said, وَأَنَّهُ الْمُنْفَرِدُ بِالْخَلْقِ وَالْإِخْتِرَاعِ. And that he is the unique in creating and inventing. So if the word invent works there, that's going to be with a capital I, and it means creating. But that's how people would translate the word ikhtira', inventing. And this is, Ahlul Sunnah said, Allah has the attribute of ikhtira'. It means creating. And some of them said, you can't even use that word for the creations. So if someone used it for a creation, he means invent. Ikhtara'a kada, he invented something. So for God, it means he created it. Al-mutawahhidu bil-ijadi wal-ibda'. He is he is alone in creating existence and creating beginning. Creating the unprecedented. He is alone in al-ijad. This means existence creating. Ijad comes from wajada. Wajada means he found. Or it means uh, he existed. Uh, so actually, ijad comes from awjada. Awjada. Awjada means to, yani he made exist. He made exist. So for Allah means existence creating. Al-ijad is existence creating. If you want, put a dash there. Like compound noun. Existence creating. Like one word, put a dash in the middle, if you want. And al-ibda'. Ibda' means creating the unprecedented. Unprecedented means something that didn't exist before. Because he made a creation that had no prior example. Was there before heavens and earth something that God copied from and then he made heavens and earth? No. خلق الخلق وأعمالهم. He created the creation and he created their deeds. He created their deeds. What does that mean? It means when you move, God creates that. You move your hands, you move your eyes, you move your feet, your tongue, God creates that. Does that mean he forces you though? No, it doesn't mean he forces you. He doesn't force you, he just creates it for you. Meaning he enables you to choose what you want to do and then you're going to do what you want to do. But he creates in you the ability to do something. He creates in you the ability to move and he creates in you the ability to manipulate your surroundings. To pick up something or put it down or put something together or break it or mix things, etc. وَقَدَّرَ أَرْزَاقَهُمْ وَآجَالَهُمْ. And he predetermined their provisions and their appointed death times. Here he talked about the qadar. Usually when we talk about qadar, either we're going to talk about qadar in its own chapter, qadar, destiny, or you can talk about qadar in the chapter of irada, will, the will of God. When you say qaddara, refers to his attribute of taqdir. The taqdir is the qadar. When Allah said, Inna kulla shay'in khalaqnahu biqadar. Indeed, everything, we created it by a qadar, by a taqdir, by a predestining, a destining, and which means a will that, a prior will, an eternal will that made everything come out the way it comes out. Al-Ghazali here, he specified two things out of all of what God preordained. He said, قَدَّرَ أَرْزَاقَهُمْ وَآجَالَهُم. He destined, he preordained their sustenances, their provisions, it's a plural, أَرْزَاقَهُم وَآجَالَهُم, and their death times, their appointments. Uh, So if you want to call that appointment, maybe you'll give it a capital A, because it's a special term here. That's an Aqidah term. In this field in which we are, this field of Aqidah, creed, the Ajal, that's one of our special words, which is the appointment, which is the death time. Every living one has an appointed death time. Every living creature, I mean. Not every living one. Excuse me. Every living creature. Allah is a living one, but he doesn't have a death time. Every living creature has a death time that is appointed for him. It will not come early and it will not be delayed. And no soul knows in what land it shall die. لا يشذ عن قبضته مقدور. There does not deviate from his grasp anything that's controlled. Nothing that's controlled. Nothing that's a subject of power slips from his grasp. So now at this point, do I have to always put the disclaimer or say grasp doesn't mean, or yani, am I able to say this and it's clear for you and you're not gonna have a heart attack? You shouldn't have a heart attack. If I were to say, And nothing controlled slips from his grasp. After all of what we've gone through, yani, then you know what this means here from Imam Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah. Means out of his power. Nothing is out of his power. ولا يعزب عن قدرته تصاريف الأمور. The many varying matters are not absent from his power. The many various matters are not absent from his power. They are not out of his power. The many various matters are not out of his power. They are not out of his control. لا تحصى مقدوراته. The matters under his power, the things under his control are unquantifiable, uncountable. What is maqdur for him? Every maqdur means a subject of power. Every maqdur, his maqdurs are uncountable. His maqdurs, the things under his power, are uncountable. How's that? Because he creates into the unending future. He creates into the unending future because he will create the lives and experiences of the people of heaven and hell. Heaven and hell that go on forever with no end. He will create their breaths as they inhale and exhale, the people of heaven and the people of hell. Heaven is real, physical. And so is hell. And he creates everything that happens because he's the only creator of anything anyway. So this cannot be counted. And because the maqdur, the thing that's under God's power or subject to God's power, is jaiz. It's a possibility. And the possibilities under his power are limitless. Literally here, the possibilities are limitless. Allah can create anything. Anything possible. He can create anything possible. When they asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how would a person walk upon his face on Judgment Day? He said, Allah has the power to make him walk upon his face. So my voice became muffled after I said, he said, when you were talking about the people walking on their faces. Okay, so I was talking about this statement here. Ghazali says here, لا تحصى مقدوراته. It means the maqdurs, his maqdurs are not quantifiable, are not countable. And then I basically gave you two explanations for that. One is that because he creates into the unending future. And two is that something that's maqdur means controlled, under power, is jaiz. It's a possibility. And the possibilities under God's power are limitless. The possibilities are literally limitless, which means Allah can create anything possible. Anything possible. And then as an example of that, I told you, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he taught his companions that on Judgment Day, a person would be walking on his face. They said, how would a person walk on his face? He told them, Allah has the power to make them walk upon their faces. I said that as one example of that the possibilities are limitless. Allah can create anything. Anything possible. لا تحصى مقدوراته What is under his power is uncountable, unquantifiable, unlimited. آمين وفيك. ولا تتناهى معلوماته. And the subjects of his knowledge, all that is known to him is unlimited. But here he talked about knowledge in the chapter of life and power. In the chapter of life and power, he talked about knowledge at the end of it. And then the next chapter is al-ilm, knowledge. Wallahu a'lam. We'll stop there. He said, is it permissible to say that the inhabitants of paradise will see something when they see Allah? Yes, because Allah is something. That means one who exists. But without Allah being in a place, direction, or being a body, color, shape, form, or resembling creations in any way, yes, that's correct. Something that's not a body or a color or a shape or a form, and something that doesn't resemble creations in any way, they will see that. That's correct. So how do the Wahhabiyya see Imam al-Ghazali? They see him as Ash'ari scum. But they might fake and say, nah, he repented before he died. Even the one who's telling you that Ghazali repented before he dies, he doesn't respect Ghazali.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Very nice class. Very nice class. Barakallahu feek.
Alhamdulillah. Ameen wa fikum. Allahul Mu'een. Allah is the one who grants the help. طيب. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.